Italian Americans have been a part of Hollywood since the early days of the American film industry, and a number of stereotypes have emerged about Italian Americans. Many of these stereotypes developed into tropes which Hollywood directors could easily use in their movies. Understanding the tropes representing Italian Americans can provide insights into the way that American culture understands Italian Americans. Two of these tropes are most notable for the staying power they've held over the years. By far the most famous trope for Italian Americans in media has been that of the gangster. This trope defines Italian Americans as members of criminal groups, typically organized crime groups like the Mafia, and the 1930s films Scarface and Little Caesar tell the story of two Italian criminals rising to the top of the criminal underworld. These criminals are violent, with no loyalty, and represent a menace to the public, eventually resulting in their downfall as their activities catch up with them. The most famous depiction of the gangster and one of the most important films in the history of American cinema is The Godfather. In The Godfather, Don Vito Corleone and later his son Michael Corleone are a groundbreaking transformation from the original gangster of the 1930s. Still ruthless criminals, they are now much smarter and morally ambiguous than the criminals of previous eras. The character of Sonny Corleone, a hot headed criminal, fits far better with the earlier depictions of gangsters, eventually being destroyed by his anger like those of the 30s films. The HBO series The Sopranos is notable for how it modernized the trope and further humanized the character. The gangster of the 90s and 2000s is not someone who guns down all his rivals, although he does that a lot. He now lives in the suburbs and he goes to therapy. In a way, this is a return to what the original gangster films had done. The gangster represents the ills of society, but this time, instead of his crime being the societal problem, his criminal nature is a way to explore problems in society. The gangster is not the only trope which emerged from the early days of Hollywood, though. The works of the Marx Brothers were incredibly influential for their comedic films. One of the characters of these films was Chico, an Italian known for behaving like a fool all the time. Of course, the fool is a comic device as old as time itself and was not unique to Chico, but the trope on display in the works of the Marx Brothers would appear time and time again afterwards. In The Godfather, and especially The Godfather Part 2, the fool is defined in the character of Fredo. This time, instead of being a comedic idiot, he's established as being a true fool, not having the prowess to make it in the criminal world in which he lives. And a similar character emerges in the film Rocky. Rocky Balboa is defined by being an amazing boxer who makes up for what he lacks in brains through brawn. And this image is reinforced in the second film when Rocky attempts to give up boxing but is unable to find work due to his lack of education, being only barely literate. Unlike Fredo, though, Rocky's character is given far more depth than being just a fool. He also has a big heart, which allows him to be complemented by his lover, Adrian, who acts as a foil to his character. Shows like The Sopranos also tap into the image of the fool, exemplified by the characters of Chris Moltisanti and Paulie Galtieri. Many times, Chris and Paulie will be wrong, but they're so confident that other characters are forced to react to it, and the audience is meant to laugh, with the characters being comic relief. This comic relief role for the Italian American fool is sort of a return to the ways of the Marx Brothers, although this time his ethnicity is not heavily emphasized, and this represents a sort of assimilation of the Italian fool into being a more typical comic relief trope independent of his ethnicity.